Hello, and a big welcome back to all my subscribers. And if you're not a subscriber, why not? Today, I'm starting a series that was suggested by a friend of mine, Paul. And Paul's probably forgotten more about programming than most people are ever going to know. But he suggested investigating keywords in languages and going through each one as a sort of a deep dive and look at the advantages, disadvantages, pitfalls, and problems that you may encounter. Now, I decided to start with the C programming language, not C++, and the if statement. Now, you might think that if you've been programming even for a couple of hours in C, you know all there is to know about the if statement. But there are side effects to some of the operators you use for if. There are problems, something called the dangling else, and other problems that you might not be aware of, like Boolean evaluations and Boolean shortcuts in the if evaluation. So stick with me to the end of the video. I'll go through all of these things and more and do a deep dive into the if statement in C. Now, if you like these sort of videos, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button. The unraveling of the C if statement is a fairly straightforward thing to look at. If the basic syntax of a if statement is if, and then in the conditional, and then the brackets. Now, this is the fundamental structure. If is the starting point. The condition enclosed in the brackets is the thing that gets evaluated to either true or false. And if the condition is true, the code is executed, and the code is contained in the curly braces, and the scope of the variables and things are all inside of these curly braces. So they are essential even if you only have one statement inside the curly braces. So the code block is the statements that are within this curly braces. So that's the basic syntax of it, and it's relatively straightforward. But the way that it is evaluated, the if statement is evaluated, is the Boolean expression, the yes or no, is determined by the evaluation inside of this expression. And one thing that people don't realize frequently is that C uses a short circuit evaluation of Boolean expressions. So in the example here, if x is greater than 0, the remainder of the if x is not greater than 0, then the remaining portion of the condition is not evaluated. And so the next bit, the y not equal to 10, is not even checked. Now, this can have problems and side effects, which we'll talk about later. You should always use parentheses if there's a possibility of ambiguity in the order of evaluation. And also readability. Write Boolean expressions in a way that enhance readability, and consider breaking up complex expressions. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about here is Boolean short-circuiting, which I mentioned earlier. Have a quick look at this code. We have a global variable set, and the initial condition condition 1, it actually sets the global variable to 1. In condition 2, it sets the global variable to 2, and then it has inside the main, if condition 1 or condition 2, then do some code and print the variable, which seems straightforward. However, The order in which this would happen in a Boolean expression is critical because, remember, it will only evaluate up to the point where it finds a false, in which case it skips all of the rest of the evaluations. So in this previous code example, condition 1 and condition 2 are functions which return Boolean values. And if condition 1 evaluates as true, condition 2 is not evaluated at all. Now, if condition 1 and condition 2 have side effects, which these do, such as modifying the variables or performing other operation, then the order in which you put them in the conditional is important. Now, in this example, if condition 1 is evaluated first and returns true, condition 2 is not evaluated, and if it was reversed, condition 2 would be executed and the global variable would be different. So in the cases where the conditions may have side effects and the order in which they're evaluated, it does make a difference. So it's essential to consider the impact of this on the program. So you need to make sure that you are aware of any potential side effect from Boolean short-circuiting. Now the next thing we want to look at is the scope of variables. In C programming, the variable is only in scope if it's inside the bracket. So they have local scope, which means they're only accessible by the other code which is in those brackets or braces. Now, the initialization and destruction of the local variable is when the if block is entered, and when it is exited, that is all destroyed, and the resources are removed. Memory allocation is done on the stack within the scope, and so once the if is exited, the memory is all freed up, so you can't get to it again. Now, local scope is great because it avoids naming conflicts and hassle, and you can use, the integer int a within 5 different if statements, and they're not going to affect each other. The local facilities means more resource management, better resource management, because memory allocation, as we said, is removed. So try to declare your variables close to when you're going to use them, and limit the variable scope. And remember that if you need to access this information outside of the if statement, then you need to make sure that it's defined outside of that scope, so it's external to the scope of the if statement. Now you can do nested if statements. So nested if statements give you a way to do complex condition trees, and in the example I've given here, the inner if is only executed if both conditions are true. It has a logical relationship between the conditions, and here proper indentation is critical for you to maintain nested structures, because it's very easy to get confused if you're not using it. And while you don't have to use braces for single statements, you really should consider using them, because it makes your code more readable and can avoid some of the other problems which we'll discuss in a minute. Now, the advantages of nested if statements is it allows you to do complex decision trees, and it gives you a more granular control over the if statements as you work your way through them. But the disadvantages of the if statement is you can do over nesting, which kind of leads to spaghetti code it's difficult to understand, and you just really don't want to use that. You should consider using logical operators instead, and or to combine these nested if statements. But remember about the whole Boolean short-circuiting problem. Now we can move on to if-else, right? So the else-if or if-else clause extends decision making beyond a single statement, but it gets around the sort of problems of nesting if statements. Now, conditions are evaluated from top to bottom. So once a condition is true, it goes into the corresponding block of code and executes that. So only the block associated with the first true condition is executed. And you can get a similar thing with nested ifs, as I said before, but else if is a better structure and more readable, and you should probably use that wherever possible. The condition should be logically grouped to reduce your sort of spaghetti code and make it more understandable and reduce errors. And also remember when you're doing this to arrange the likelihood for maximum efficiency. So if it's more often true than not, put that condition at the top in the if. And then the next most likely into the else if, and then the not as likely in the else, so that it's more efficient because it goes straight into the first true condition that it finds. And if the very first condition is the first true condition, it short circuits a lot of evaluation. And then we have the ternary operator. Now, I've seen this quite a bit, and it's useful, but it can cause problems with readability of your code. So basically, it's a compact way to do an if-else statement. So you have the condition, then the question mark, and the expression if it's true, and then a colon, and then the expression if it's false. So this is very straightforward, but it can lead to unreadable code, right? In some cases, it enhances code readability if it's a really short thing, like the one above. But you should avoid it for any complex condition, because it just becomes unreadable. And nesting these things is just a nightmare. So you're much better off using a set of else-if blocks for clarity. Now, this ain't just to help the people who might read your code. It might help future you as well, who would need to pick apart these sort of nested ternary operations. Now, there are some side effects when you use these, because the ternary operator actually evaluates both expressions, right? And can cause some potential problems. So, in this example above, when it runs, it will evaluate both. So it will increment B and decrement B. And we don't really know what the result of that would be. And we don't know sort of what order this might happen in. But both statements will change B, but we're not really sure what the effect will be. So have a think about that when you're using the ternary operator. Remember that unlike an if statement, this thing will evaluate both, not just the first one that is true. And then we move on to something called the dangling else problem. Now, you don't, unlike Python, which isn't C is not based on indentation. So what happens is the else statement is associated with the nearest if statement. Now, you really should use braces, and although you don't have to use them, you really should use braces all the time in C, because this will let you understand explicitly where the else statement, or what the else statement is related to. And so adopting best practices and using proper indentation will really help you later when you go through this and you're trying to debug or find problems or issues. So although you can use single line, I would recommend against it. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is sort of some advanced concepts. So you can use the AND operator for bitwise operations. So this is a bitwise AND, not a logical AND, like we were doing before. If you remember, we had if x equals 1 and y equals 10. That was a double ampersand marker. This is a single ampersand marker, and it does a bitwise AND on the value. So this evaluates if the bit specified by the mask is set. Now there are some others. There's the pipe equals and percent equals and caret equals for bitwise manipulation. You can look into those and work more with it. But as far as the if statement goes, it is looking for a non-zero value when it evaluates this operation. And these work on individual bits, while logic AND is the entire Boolean condition. Now the next sort of advanced concept we have is approximately equal to. So what we've got here, floating point comparisons can lead to precision issues. And so you have this potential problem where it's close but not close enough. But you want to know if it's near enough. You don't need an exact match, you just need to know that it's close enough to this number, then it's considered true. So here epsilon is a small positive value representing an acceptable difference between x and y, which would then let the if statement evaluate that as equal or true. And then your value depends on the desired level of precision, and you can set this yourself and you can work out what you need as far as precision goes, and pick the appropriate value. So the use of epsilon in floating point comparisons is great because often with floating point comparisons you may not get an exact match, but you may not need an exact match in your program. So you just need to keep in mind the difference, the trade-offs between precision and computational cost, because the more precision you go for, the more computational cost it's going to have on your program. So that's it from me today. I hope that you enjoy this new series. I'll be diving into many more statements for the do while, the go to statement in C, and the return statements and things like that, and just get a really deep dive into these keywords and the commands and the problems and pitfalls and things that surround them, and the potential advantages you have using them. If you like this sort of thing, once again, like and subscribe, and please have a look at my website, xgipublishing.com, if you're interested in reading any of my books. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.